Thank you for joining us today. I'm Vedant Sharan,
I'm Winston Shaw.
and we are here with another episode of Crossfire. So our guest today is Cathy Dos Santos from the Miami Transit Alliance, and she's here to discuss the upcoming rate fare hike in the county. So, Cathy, before we get into that, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure thing. Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Cathy Dos Santos. I am the Executive Director of Transit Alliance Miami. We are a nonprofit organization that advocates for a Miami built for people, not cars. There's a lot that goes into that, but essentially our main purpose, our mission as an organization is to equip Miamians to influence transit decisions, and that is equipping them with information, with data, sometimes with talking points, but most importantly, showing them how to get involved and what to demand from our elected officials, and what is better transit. What does that look like for Miami?
So you mentioned built for people, not for cars. I know that you've done the paved
Paradise.
Paved Paradise initiative,
Yeah.
and a couple years back, Miami went back to mandatory parking minimums for all buildings, including ones built near transit. So, what do you think the future of that issue looks like in this city, and do you think there's any way to stop us from going backward on it?
Yeah, and I'm so excited that you touched on that point because truly, parking. It's not like the sexiest subject, but it does actually invoke a lot of emotions from people. Parking mandates, which you just referenced, are essentially requiring any built infrastructure, whether it's business, residential, whatever it may be, to have a certain number of parking spots per unit or per acreage or footage of the thing that is being built. And right now, on average, it really can vary per project and per municipality, per whoever is the decision maker. But on average, we're building about 2 parking spots per apartment for businesses that even those that are selling alcohol that have liquor licenses. Places that you don't necessarily want people to drive to have required parking mandates. And essentially what this means is that this really restricts what we can build, where we can build it. And it really makes that everything is centered around how is the car gonna get to this space, where is it gonna park, but ultimately the car is not buying anything, the car is not living somewhere, it's just being placed somewhere so that the human can get out of the car and go do things. And yet so much of our county is shaped around the car. And so our Pay Paradise campaign is essentially breaking down a little bit of the effects. Actually, not a little bit. It breaks down quite a few of the effects of what parking does to our decision making, especially when it comes to affordable housing, especially as how it affects our resilience as a county that is facing flooding from heavy rains or from rising sea level, heat island effect. All these things are exacerbated by the fact that we have paved paradise. That's why the campaign is called that. We just cover it in concrete and we're like, well, the car has to sit somewhere and that's better for the car. But the city is not about the cars. The city is about the people. And you can say, well, the car enables the people to go from place to place, but so can so many other things that we actively deprioritize in lieu of the car. So that's what Pay Paradise is about. You're correct that the city of Miami, a few years, they had reduced parking minimums and they went back on that. Lord knows why they did that. But at least when it comes to the county level and even at the state level through certain, some of it controversial legislation, like I know Live Local for a lot of municipalities is a very sore point, but Live Local did do a great thing for affordable housing when it comes to housing that is being built near transit. So those parking minimums were much lowered. We actually have some really interesting projects that have in the recent years come about and are in the pipeline that some of them are completely parking free. Actually, I believe there's one project in the Little Havana area that is not too far from the Brickell station that actually doesn't have any parking, and instead the developer provided an alternative of rideshare that is subsidized for the residents of the building. And it's still relying on cars, but it's lowering not only literally the amount of parking that you're providing, but the digital footprint of the development. It makes it cleaner, and our position is that ultimately we live in a state that likes to say it's very pro business, and let's let business decide what's the parking level that is appropriate for their consumer. At the end of the day, they're going to want to sell that unit. They're going to want to make sure that the business that is leasing from the area is successful. Yeah. So let's put it back on their plate to decide what is the level of parking that's appropriate for them.
Yeah, so it's kind of, you're saying it's kind of more like excess regulation that's like kind of hurting them, because like business can kind of see how many units it might need, because like every apartment might not need 2 parking spaces, right? Not everyone has multiple people driving like in their apartment, and like in general, yeah, I can see how there's a lot of excess. Like for example, you can go look at, I just know like from personal experience, just like going to like Dadeland, all those apartments there, they're like half the building is just parking spots for the top half. So.
And I'll say it, sometimes it's like just a straight up eyesore, because what's the easiest parking that can be provided? Because building parking garages in itself is expensive, right? The easiest parking that you can build is paving a lot, and that's it. And now you've lost so much space. And that's what we like about our campaign. We try to make it a little bit interactive so people can, there's some widgets that people can check out. People can go to transitalliance.miami, not .org, not .com, .miami. And under our campaigns, you'll see Pay Paradise, and you can learn a little bit about the impact there, but really to see the scale. We're talking about if you're building a building that has 10 units or 10 floors, you need a very sizable parking lot, and you either put that into the building, so you end up with those buildings that half the height is just the parking lot, and maybe the parking is quote unquote free, like you are renting a unit, you're not charging it, but nothing is free. Yeah. Nothing is free in the United States. So every time that you pay your rent, part of that is going into paying for that parking spot, even if there's no line cutting it out. Every time that you go buy something at a Publix, part of that is covering the free parking that you're getting. And it's a difficult concept to explain, because people are not constantly getting hit with like, it's not like the Sun Pass that every time that they go on it, they're going to get that bill at the end of the month. It's not every time that they tap like the fare, you see the $225 that is charged to your account. It's something that's highly invisible, yet at the same time it shapes our entire like urban landscape. So yeah.
So what I'm wondering is, I'm a Southland Mall fan, and Southland Mall has been a little bit dead in recent years. Yeah. They're, as I'm sure you know, bulldozing much of it and rebuilding mixed-use developments with retail space and apartments and hotels and much more. This is and this building was probably enabled because of the planned South Dade Metro Busway that's under development. So what do you think is the kind of chicken versus the egg here? Do you think that mixed-use urbanism needs to happen for there to be the market for transit, or do you think transit creates mixed-use urbanism in its path?
That is an great question. I don't quite know that you can put one in front of the other. I do have to say that is why like something that is really good about our transit decision making, at least, or the Department of Transportation and Public Works. They're gonna love that I'm saying this, but they actually have a transit-oriented development office within their department, because I think they have recognized that, and there is a certain amount of work that happens between them and also the Public Housing and Community Development Office. It might not be called that anymore. It used to be called PHCD, the county level. But you can have transit without having that level of density. It will not be good transit. That's what I would say as response to that. And when you don't have quote unquote good transit and you live in places like Florida that are hardly car dependent, where transit operations are constantly being made a choice that our politicians have to either back or oftentimes don't back. And that can lead to, the defunding of departments, cutting off routes, and other things that has been part of our history in Miami-Dade. If you are not developing and growing in a way that enables our communities to reach that level of good transit, and what is good transit, that can be its own separate conversation, but it's something that it has to be reliable enough and frequent enough that people feel like they don't need to live by a schedule to use. So I would describe good transit as the feeling of like, okay, I am about to head into the office, and I'm just gonna step out of my home, walk over to my bus stop, that hopefully is not an uncomfortable walk. It's not something that's over 10 minutes, and I can show up, and I don't even need to see when the next bus is coming. There will be a next one. Maybe I wait 5, maybe I wait 10 minutes, but I can be sure that something is going to show up within a reasonable amount of time, and that I'm going to make it there. Also, that journey is not going to take me, as oftentimes it currently does, twice as long as it would if I were in a private vehicle. But to more directly answer your question, in Miami-Dade, we're, for the most part, following the process of, like, if we look at things like Live Local, then I would say that we're following a process of like where we have frequent enough transit, then we will have a density to match it, to enable it, which is a good step. But it's also reliant on having connections where you already have other people taking transit. Yeah. So then you see a lot of more growth happening in areas around the Metro Rail, for example. But then there's other areas that could really benefit from growth, and that maybe have future corridors planned, but are not really having that density now. So whatever transit you have in it now is not really capturing that many people. And it's maybe because the first and last mile is really not there, or it's, you just have a bunch of suburban housing, which is much harder to connect to transit, because we're talking about, like, if you draw a random circle and you count how many people in that area, it's just much smaller than it would be in a place like downtown.
Yeah. I was thinking also, like, alongside all this stuff you're talking about in transit, I remember seeing a lot of this on like your website, on your transit scorecard, about talking about how these buses, how they're often delayed and stuff like that, makes it not the most reliable system, and how it can hurt the usage. So I was wondering, alongside the scorecard, and we talked about the paved paradise, what are some other things your organization has done to kind of help Miami with these issues? I remember seeing you've restored some funding already, and so what are some other stuff like that you've done to try to address all these concerns?
Oh my goodness. Well, we've been around for 10 years now. A few different executive directors until now. I have the joy of having served in this position since 2023, but we've really been around since 2015. And one of the key sort of the flagship projects that we worked with Miamians and also our county government to enable was the Better Bus Network. That is a project that started back in 2018. And it really started from the perspective of the transit riders. We had been doing a campaign called Where's My Bus, where over a span of a few weeks, we sort of dove really deep into different critical issues around reliability, convenience, and access to transit, and we focused on the bus because at the end of the day, it's what carries the most people. I don't know if the figures at this moment is 7 out of 10 or 2/3, but a big majority of folks riding transit in Miami-Dade are doing so on the bus. And that is, a system that doesn't have the same benefit of the Metro Rail in the sense, or the Metro Mover even, in the sense of having its own dedicated right of way. In the case of the Metro Mover and the Metro Rail, they're elevated. No car is getting in front of it. The bus very much sits in the same traffic. And when before we did the Better Bus Network, some characteristics of our bus system is that we had a lot of routes that weren't quite meeting internal goals of the department in terms of ridership. They were very circuitous. We had a lot of things that were called circulators. They were very neighborhood based, almost like emulating what some of the trolley systems do. There was also a lot of repetition among routes. And ultimately, we had what was, we now, fully know the term for it, but we had a coverage network, a system that went really far into a lot of reaches in the county, but to the detriment of being fast and moving people effectively, quickly, and moving a lot of people, right? So the Better Bus Network was born out of, identifying all these concerns and us just realizing it was like, okay, the department has attempted in the past to do network redesigns. They haven't really happened since like the network that we knew at the time had been launched in the 80s. So we sort of said like, maybe us being outsiders is the thing that does it. Maybe us being an independent organization, and especially an organization that is driven by community engagement, is driven by representing the voice and the concerns of riders, can be the thing that moves this forward. And it was that, as well as bringing in the business community and fortifying their understanding of the benefits that transit does for them as large employers, as folks that need to reach a bigger labor force. But it was, a process with a lot of bumps, but that in 2020, right before the pandemic, we had a plan that was fully community informed. It was the biggest outreach that had ever been done to transit riders and residents around the topic of transit in Miami-Dade, in order to answer questions like, what would you prefer? Walking a little bit longer to your bus stop and having a shorter wait once you're there, or having a closer bus stop and waiting longer once you're there? So those were questions that allowed us to, and at the same time, we were explaining what these concepts were of what is a coverage model versus a high frequency model. And we worked with a transit planning agency, because we're not transit planners ourselves. We have had folks that have, at the very least, urban planning experience and definitely degrees that are a little bit more relevant perhaps than mine. But we have always been an organization of, first and foremost, transit riders that are frustrated and that are willing to do the work to figure out what the right answer for our communities are. Yeah. So we worked with all these folks and the county to figure out what was a transit network that met the community priorities in the best way, and that was the launch of the Better Bus Network. And there were certainly some improvements that still had to be done, and they continue to do those. But also part of the big reason why we had to do that is because right before we launched into this Where's My Bus campaign, or even the Better Bus Network campaign, we were still facing transit cuts as a county. And those were sort of recurring in the post-recession years. And it really came down to the fact that we had a combination of a network that wasn't moving. So, when I'm talking about good transit, we didn't really quite have that good transit. And a symptom of that was the fact that our ridership was just in continuous decline, as opposed to the upward trajectory that we now see. And that led our elected officials to continuously say, well, if you can't pick up more riders, then why are we spending this much money on transit? Let's cut that route. That route is not doing that well, so let's cut that. And you cannot have a transit network that works properly if those routes are not working together. Ultimately, you cannot move everybody with just one single bus route. So you need a variety of things, right? And that's why the Better Bus Network, moving towards a high frequency model that was completely informed by community perspective, does sometimes require folks to transfer, because it essentially calls for them to, if you're heading northeast, you probably will have to head east before you head north, or head north before you head east. And that's just a way to provide more options for everybody. But that was a really large project that was born out of the understanding that our transit system was constantly going to be debated in terms of it was a worthwhile investment because it wasn't reaching those upward trajectories on ridership.
So I've definitely lived some of those reliability issues. I think when you talk about transfer, that is an important point because as a native New Yorker, I know the MTA pretty well, and I don't think anybody would contend that the MTA is a pretty good transit network.
Except MTA riders.
Except MTA riders, of course. You know, New Yorkers, we love to
They,
complain.
you know, they live there. They can criticize it the same way that only Miamians can criticize Miami.
Exactly. You have to transfer constantly on the subway, and it still creates a much more efficient network through those transfers. So I want to touch on something specifically you said about that traffic issue. How important do you think these busway projects are in terms of getting these dedicated bus lanes that are separated from the road in terms of improving ridership? Because as you mentioned, a lot of the reason people don't ride is because right now it takes longer than being on the road. Miami, we're a city with a lot of traffic. You know, we've all experienced
and only worsening
sitting on US 1 for an hour trying to get 5 or 6 miles. So during those peak hours, it should be perfect, but the buses are ending up sitting in that traffic. So how important do you think those busway networks are?
They're absolutely critical. And I think actually the busway, Metro Express, I believe is how it's being launched, is going to be a really interesting model, especially it's already generally a much faster travel than if you were sitting on US 1, even without the signal prioritization that it's now going to have. But the signal prioritization that, which essentially just means that when the bus is approaching an intersection, there's basically a signal that it gives to change the light so that the bus can continue on its merry way, because the bus is carrying, these are going to be, I believe, like articulated buses. So they could be carrying up to, I'm going to undershoot the number just to be safe, but at least 60 passengers versus how many cars can cross an intersection, a US 1 in one light cycle. So, at the end of the day, shouldn't we be prioritizing moving the most people the fastest? In my opinion, yes. So this is going to be a really interesting test for something like that. The 836 right now has a bus on shoulder that I used to do that ride. So a fun fact, when I graduated from college, I moved to Miami, back to Miami in 2020, I actually found out that the 836 had finally launched. That's the bus route number, because I was commuting from my parents' house to downtown in my parents' car that they had let me borrow for the day. And I was sitting in the horrible 8 a.m. 836 traffic, and I see this bus like zooming past me, and I'm like, it reopened, because at the time, the only other alternative that I had was to take the 51 for about an hour and a half to 2 hours in the morning and in the evening to downtown, because I lived at the time that far west. And, it was actually it was a pleasant enough ride in the sense that, okay, I just sat there and I got to chill. I got to be on my phone, but it was a really long ride. So every now and then I would borrow the car. And those alternatives definitely we need more of. The complication there is that a lot of those critical projects are not as attractive as, hey, let's have a metro rail line. Or oftentimes we like to plan for more robust projects, or we don't want to take away a lane from the car. That is, and honestly, nowadays, the state of Florida has made it even harder to do that. Nowadays, the level of like notifying the different neighborhoods, and the difficulty is also of different transit agencies working together. Well, not even transit agencies, transportation agencies working together, because a lot of the places where the bus right now gets stuck, and I invite people to check out our 2023 mobility scorecard, because we actually worked with the University of Florida, so we have some graphics that quite literally show the areas where the bus gets stuck. Those are roadways that are largely managed and owned by Florida Department of Transportation. So that is a sort of like another hurdle in terms of coordination of having those bus lanes. But to be quite honest, I don't find that our local governments are really much thinking about bus lanes, because when we're thinking about mass rapid transit, they really are more so thinking about Metro Mover, Metro Rail. Never mind that those projects are decades down the line. Even the ones that are best positioned for success, like the Northeast Corridor or the Bay Link, which the Northeast Corridor would be commuter rail from downtown to Aventura and even beyond to the like Broward and West Palm Beach. And the Bay Link, which is the Metro Mover, the proposed Metro Mover connection between downtown and the beach, projects that we know would be successful from day one in terms of ridership, are still years down the line, because building capital projects, building that infrastructure is a really time-consuming, really expensive endeavor. And I don't know if you've been following the county or state or federal budget, but there's not a lot of money being thrown around.
So yeah, speaking of the budget, because I think like the financial like connections between transit's like really important to talk about, because you know a lot of people will say that like, why am I spending, like, why are we as taxpayers having to, you know, subsidize people riding trains and stuff like that and the bus? But like I remember seeing on your website, there's a lot of like economic benefits of transit too, right? And especially for, it can really help a lot of people like that are, you know, lower income and stuff like that, because it can be like their only way to get to work and stuff like that. So I know that you guys just recently, when we're talking about the budget, you know, were able to lower the was it the fare for STS?
It was we've been advocating for a couple things this budget cycle, and specifically for STS riders, for special transportation services riders, which is largely a service helping individuals with disabilities and elderly individuals who realistically cannot drive or even having or even accessing bus and rail services. They have difficulty accessing those services, so they're eligible for this particular service, which is called STS. That particular service, I believe it currently costs $3.50 a ride, and the proposed fare increase was of 75 cents. We shared with the Department some information that this was not required to be raised to that 22% that the rest of fares are currently proposed to be raised, which we also think is way too high for bus and rail fares. And they were able to figure out how to lower that fare increase by 50 cents to 25 cents, which even in that case, we really argue that fare increase, especially when it comes to STS, should be completely eliminated. Because first of all, if we're looking at numbers and we're looking at, we need to generate money for transit, that's only going to generate $400,000 for transit. That doesn't do much in the large scheme of things for enabling transit, and we're really talking about taxing a user that is already paying for a service that's more expensive, and it's a service that is largely understood like by the users themselves. They call it unreliable because it's a contracted service, so it's difficult for them in terms of when putting in complaints. There's not really much resolution that can be tracked there from the user perspective. And beyond that, you have to order 24 hours in advance, and it gives you a 2-hour window for pickup and a 2-hour window for drop-off. Not that, your entire trip is going to be within these 2 hours. No, it could pick you up. Okay, you need to be at the doctor's at 10 a.m. Then that means that you might be getting picked up at 6 a.m.
Wow.
Yeah. So imagine, and the fact that you have to order within 24 hours in advance, we're talking about something that it's not really allowing a lot of freedom for people. Yes, it's still a lifeline service, but because of all these factors, we really stand by the fact that it should not be raised whatsoever. And when it comes to the bus and rail fares, which are currently being proposed to be raised by 50 cents, which, mind you, for daily users would be $325 more that they're paying. Mind you, to ride transit daily in Miami-Dade, it will cost you like over $1,000 annually. Like the monthly pass, I believe, is $112 with 50 cents, and all of those, the daily pass, the monthly, the weekly, the fare, everything is going up by 22%. And when we're looking at other transit systems that have had fares in recent years, because, okay, we understand Miami hasn't had fare increases since 2013, but all these other places have increased by 9 to 12%. So we're looking at, they're increasing by 15 cents, 25 cents. We're going the full whopping 50. That's a lot. It's also very fast, and it's happening during a time that people, unemployment rates are increasing. People feel very insecure about the state of the economy. The cost of living in Miami continues to go up, but our wages are not really going up at the same rate. And it's really going to hurt our most vulnerable riders. And yes, a lot of things are increasing in fees in this budget because the deficit is gigantic. But this, to us, really feels like a slap in the face to transit riders because no other fee, to our knowledge, is going up by this amount. Other things have been lowered, but not the fare increase. And it's really targeting a very small group that honestly are providing, this is a public benefit, and it should be funded as a public benefit. That's what transit is. Yeah. But honestly, every transit rider is providing a public benefit for Miami. Yeah. Because guess what? Me choosing to take the bus means that you have one less car in front of you. So even if you're not a transit rider, even if you hate the bus, if you hate traffic, you are pro-transit. Even if you're not willing to stake your bet on it, you are pro-transit because it's the only alternative. Other than all of us suddenly being able to work from home, which is not realistic and not the case for most of Miami because we are a service economy, every single transit rider is providing a public service. I will stand by that.
So the budget thing you mentioned segues well into another issue in this year's budget, which is the planned $82 million cut for future transit projects that were planned, mainly the Miami South Beach corridor. So do you think that some of the plans that Miami has set out are realistic or unrealistic? And do you think that there's a better way that this entire issue should be approached where we don't have to talk about billion-dollar projects just to help people?
The conversation as to why transit projects cost so much is a really nuanced one. Whenever y'all want to come back to talk about that more in depth, we absolutely can. But you are correct that every single one of the SMART program projects is honestly the ones that are best positioned for success are all in the billions. And actually, I would say that the South Day Transitway, sometimes you'll still see it in the comments. I don't think I'm raising anything that people don't know, but if the TPW puts out a post about the Metro Express service and the BRT that is coming, you'll see at least one or two comments of people saying should have been a Metro Rail. I am so sorry, South Dade, but if the South Dade Transitway were a Metro Rail, you would not have anything. And so I think we have to get realistic on, based on the density that we have and the funding that is available and that we are honestly competing for, because every single one of these corridors, it's not even that we're competing amongst ourselves for which project gets the funding. We're competing at a national level for federal funding because we cannot fund these projects on our own. People are like, oh, but the half penny tax, the half penny tax. The half penny tax is welcome, and it sets us up in a way that we're in a better position than a lot of other American cities, definitely a lot of better position than a lot of other places in Florida. But the half penny tax can only raise so much. Decisions at the state level are actually hindering our ability to maximize that income. We have lost, I believe, over $20 million this year because the state legislature decided to do away with a business lease tax that hurts us and actually hurts also Jackson, the Jackson Hospital complex. So that's $20 million less that we're going to see every year to fund these future projects. And we're constantly having, these fights about operations and should the subsidy be as high for transit as it is, and to issues like to fund Metro Connect this time around, we are raiding funds from the TID. And that's going to continue happening until our elected officials and honestly our residents tell our elected officials that, hey, funding transit is absolutely worth it and it's a needed community benefit. Because at the end of the day, the difficulty of transit is that people will say, oh, but you charge fares, so it should be even, or it should make money off of that. Or why should I as a driver be paying for transit? Again, number one, every single transit user provides a public benefit to all of Miami-Dade in reduced traffic. But beyond that, every dollar invested in transit leads a $4 return on economic growth for Miami-Dade, because every single one of those people are workers. Every single dollar invested means that we are reducing the toll even on our roads. People say, like, why should I subsidize transit? Me as a transit user, every time I buy something, I also subsidize our roadways and our highways and all these things that maybe I don't use as much. So it really all adds up, and we're not gonna sort out our transit issues until we start, number one, to answer your question more directly, being very critical of what capital projects we actually invest in, and ensuring that we are targeting moving as much people as possible, because that's really what is what's gonna enable us to be competitive at a national level and say, hey, federal government, you gave us these $60 million to build this thing, and we did an amazing thing. We have all these positive outcomes to show us a result. Because honestly, that's the competitive system that we are in. And number two, not leaving our other communities behind that maybe are not ready to see a massive transportation investment of an expansion of the metro rail or even a BRT or a bus lane. But can we please make sure that every single neighborhood has sidewalks, crosswalks, tree coverage, so that people can actually even walk to their normal bus stops with shelters? We really cannot leave behind those small but mighty assets. Those are not accessories. They are absolutely critical to a working transportation landscape. And in my opinion, they are as sexy as a metro rail line.
Yeah, I completely agree. So Miami is one of the fastest growing cities in America. And in 2 days, our commission is going to be voting on this issue about raising the fare. So wherever you stand, I encourage all of you, make your voice heard and make sure that our city can have the future that it deserves. Cathy Dos Santos, thank you so much for coming on our show. We'd love to have you on in the future.
Absolutely.
So this has been...
Yeah, also, do you want to plug anything if anyone's interested to learn more about your website and stuff like that?
If anybody's interested to learn about our budget campaign or any other campaigns, please go to transitalliance.miami. The budget hearing is this Thursday, September 18th. Absolutely, please show up. Contact your commissioner in any way you can. And please follow us on all of our socials as Transit MIA.
All right. Thank you again so much for coming on. This has been Crossfire. Thank you all for watching.